Good afternoon. My name is Derickson Lawrence. I'm the former chair of the City of Mt Vernon Charter Revision Commission and current candidate for City Comptroller. What we're about to undertake today is unpopular. It's unpopular because we are challenging the status quo. But we're challenging the status quo because it's the right thing to do. We have several speakers today that will make the case for why the law and ordinance that was passed on April 14th was absolutely the wrong thing to do. So we'll make two sets of points. First, we'll lay the case as to the why, and then we'll end with the solution set. Leading that charge for the why is a pillar of our community, is the pastor of the Greater Centennial AME Zion Church, and that is the Rev Dr Pogue. Dr. Pogue.
Thank you, Derickson, and good afternoon, everyone. For me, this is not about politics. This is about what's right. And the legislation that was passed just a few weeks ago by the City Council was absolutely not right. If you take a moment to read the legislation, you will find that the legislation itself acknowledges the fact that they were about to break the charter of the City of Mt Vernon. While the City Council has legislative authority, they also acknowledge in the resolution or in the legislation that the Comptroller has the responsibility to receive and disperse the funds for the city. We must understand that we cannot pass legislation based on a person. The City Council has made this personal. We have to make sure that the legislation that we pass does not bypass the offices that the citizens of Mt Vernon have elected. Yes, we acknowledge that there are some issues with the Comptroller's office, but just because there's issues does not mean that we set up dangerous precedents that we've set up to bypass the Comptroller's office and put money in the water department or the Board of Water Supply that we've already know in the past that have been used as slush funds and for pet projects that have no budget line items. If you read the legislation, not only will funds from the American Rescue Plan Act be put into that account, but funds from FEMA will be put into that account. FEMA funds are going to be reimbursable. Why aren't those funds going back to the same place that they came from? Unless that these funds are going to be used for the FEMA funds. We must understand that this is dangerous legislation. Even if you read the legislation, there are no checks and balances in the legislation. Even in Section 1, letter E of the legislation, it says that the Board of Water Supply shall create the budget that they'll give to the mayor and Board of Estimates. It has nothing to do with the City Council. They bypass the City Council. The City Council, the public, should be the ones making sure that we have proper legislation and proper budgeting for every one of these dollars that come into the city. This is so dangerous that we are setting up pass-through accounts. Pass-through accounts going to departments that have not shown an audit to the public in years. We need to make sure that these funds coming in from the American Rescue Plan Act are used to help our city. Our city needs help, and we need to make sure that these funds go to the places that the public has an opportunity to talk about. If you're going to change the Charter Revision Committee took 3 years to change the Charter. And this legislation virtually changes the charter without public input, without public support, without a public vote. This is absolutely wrong. And so we stand here today and we're asking the City Council to go back and repeal this legislation. When they repeal this legislation, we're asking them that no funds from the American Rescue Plan Act will be expended without a budget that is approved by the community, the City Council, and the Board of Estimates. We're asking the City Council that they go back and make sure that the public, the City Council, and the Board of Estimates will be made aware of all FEMA funds and what line item of the budget they're being withdrawn from so that they can be reimbursed. We're asking the city council that they will have more oversight and voice on how these funds are expended. We're asking the city council that there will be a public hearing on this legislation and the budget of the $42 million and the FEMA funds that will come into the city. More importantly, we're asking the city council to create and enact legislation banning all pass-through accounts and continue to work with the Comptroller's office and be responsible for the duties that are invested in that office through the city charter. We're also asking, by bypassing the city Comptroller's office, it may seem necessary in the moment. It may seem important in the moment, but we must not make this personal. And remember that the office of the Comptroller is vested with responsibilities and reasons for accountability to this community. This is not about the person. It's not about the person in the seat, but it's about the office that we must understand that the citizens of this community have elected, and we must uphold the authority of that commission. This legislation is dangerous, that any future mayor, any future city council, anytime they don't want to work with a person, they'll be able to enact legislation to bypass the duly elected person for the citizens of the city of Mount Vernon. This legislation is wrong, and it needs to be changed. Stronger checks and balances must be put into this legislation so that these $42 million plus will be protected and used to help this city move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Pogue. In Reverend Pogue's remarks, he talks about the fact that this legislation violates the city charter. Our next speaker will speak on the issue of violating not only your charter, but our state laws. He's a former member of the Charter Revision Commission. That is Reverend Franklin Williams.
Thank you, Derickson. I am Reverend Pastor Franklin Williams, pastoring the Gospel Tabernacle Church, Mt Vernon resident. My ministry is in the Bronx. I just want to make it clear, I am not a politician. I am not seeking or running for office. What I am is a very concerned citizen. We've volunteered almost 3 years on the Charter Revision Commission and have spent time delving deep into understanding the charter and learning now what I have learned. I just want to educate Mt Vernonites. I'm calling for Mt Vernonites to put together a rescue plan that will rescue the American rescue plan from the hands of this new law that has been created. I just want to bring to your attention the laws. The first law that is Section 8, Charter Article 8, Section 91 of the Charter Revision. It says it empowers the Comptroller, among other things, to demand, collect, receive, and have care and custody of disbursements and all monies belonging to or due to the city of every source. And the second is the State Municipality Home Rule Law, Section 23. And that says, because its effects circumvent the elected controller when an ordinance or the higher threshold law usurps the charter. This is an ordinance. It requires the voter, a referendum, and a ballot initiative to implement this change. Such change did not take place. This was done, I don't know how, but we have before us even an example, a case before the Supreme Court, the Appellate Division, back in August 9th, 2011. It says that Mt Vernon City versus the City Council of Mt Vernon. And we see clearly here where even the law stated that this was in violation. And the third one I want to bring to you is that if those weren't enough, we have seen this particular law before us, not in New Rochelle, not in Yonkers, but right here. I have copies here that I want to release to the press. I want to give to those who are standing here. And I'm really calling for the Mt Vernon residents. The Bible said in Hosea, as reverence, that my people are destroyed because of ignorance. And we are here to educate the people about what's happening in the city of Mt Vernon. This is the jewel. Let's put back the shine on this jewel. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've heard from Reverend Pogue, who talked about the issue of setting a precedent. We've heard from Reverend Williamson, who talked about the issue of legality, the fact that it's illegal, and stated the reasons why. We'll hear from now businessmen who will talk about the risks, and that is Bill Rowe. Bill, come forward.
Thank you, Derickson. So, the risks of this ordinance. This decision exposes the city to additional financial risks, something we cannot afford. It also increases its credit risk. The designated recipient of these funds, the Board of Water Supply, has been plagued with material weaknesses. According to a 2017 audit completed in March of 2021, just this past March, the auditors could not render an opinion on the reliability of the internal financial controls for that year. Further, we are all aware of the alleged misuse of funds in 2018 and 2019 for the Board of Water Supply. Those risks are yet to be quantified because we don't have audited financials for 2018, 2019, or 2020 yet. Those audits are still open. As of April 20th, 2021, the completed 2017 audit was not published on the city's website and has not been broadly circulated. On top of that, very little is known or is available about the organizational, reporting structure, and oversight of the Board of Water Supply. This lack of transparency regarding the functioning of this municipal agency is quite stunning. So given the public interest here, the public should have been informed about the audit and other available data about the Board of Water Supply before the crucial City Council vote on this ordinance. This raises a lot of other issues, and I'd like to know, where is the accountability? So we've got a problem. Because this ordinance sunsets in July of 2022, the next controller will be encumbered by its actions. When the next controller takes office in January, they won't be able to function with these dollars. They'll be in the Board of Water Supply. This debunks the myth of mistrust of the current controller as the rationale for this travesty. So, given all I've said, this does not really represent a scintilla of risk mitigation. In fact, it appears reckless. It extends the sky is falling emergency mode of operating, and it further imperils our credit standing and the credit rating community. For those reasons, the City Council and City Administration should reverse this decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe. You know, I just would like to pick up from where you left off. As you talked about the risks, in particular, if anybody reads that bill, at the very end of it, you will see that it ends in 2022, and that's June of 2022. That means if I'm elected, then that law circumvents me as the new controller. When I raised that issue to the Journal News, they called on the city on this issue, and the response they got back was, wait a minute, we can change it at the end of this year. And what does that mean? It means that they're making laws to suit an individual. And so this legislation does not serve the public interest. That's the challenge we're having with this today. Those who introduced this legislation and others who were silent should really be ashamed, because this legislation should not stand. I'm going to transition from risk to transparency at this point. We just had a release from an audit from our state controller, Mr. DiNapoli. He says, in short, that we in the city are walking a tightrope. We're walking a tightrope without a safety net. If you look at the last budget, they took away our reserves. And when you're walking around with no safety net on a high wire, it is not the time to take risks. You know, I am reminded of this movie called A Few Good Men, where the character of Tom Cruise asks Jack Nicholson, "Tell me the truth." And Jack Nicholson responds, "You can't handle the truth." But we are saying to our city administration, try us. We know that the controller today has not been transparent or accountable at this point. And if we're going to demand transparency from the controller's office, we need to demand the same level of transparency from the URA, the IDA, and the Board of Water Supply, which is the reason we're here today. So there was an audit released on March 8th for the Board of Water Supply, but you can't find that on the city's website. In fact, if you ask for it, you have to get a FOIL to release that information. I don't know how long that is, but that tells me that they're telling us we cannot handle the truth. But this is the consent of the governed. When the controller tells us that she just can only make payroll and nothing else, we need to listen to her. When we subpoena the bank accounts that everybody talks about, let's see the money, and it's 30 days and we're still not hearing anything, we've got to make some assumptions. My view is we're probably this close. We can handle the truth. We know what's going on right now. The truth is we can't continue to operate through grants. The truth is we can't continue with these late budgets. They're killing us. Whether it's boiler underwater or gasoline shortage, they're killing us. The truth is we must change our decision-making process from emergency mode to long-term planning so that we can get our ratings back and operate like other municipalities. The truth is, the American Rescue Plan is a step in that lineup, but not with the current legislation. So where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? What choices do we have? That's the burning question. Everybody says, if we take away the legislation, where do we put the money? What do we do with it? I have 3 recommendations. 1, let's form a citizens budget committee. At least 3 groups in there. Clergy, folks with finance background, general citizens, and others. And come up with the priorities, whether it's infrastructure, sewer, public safety, technology. And the mayor should be leading the charge. That's number 1. So we set up this committee that's sort of the sounding board that has the folks in there. Number 2, we vet a whole new set of options for this American Rescue Plan dollars. And there are several options available. But they have to be options that don't violate our city charter and they do not violate our state laws. We'll give you just one example. We can set up an intermediary, an escrow fund. We've heard members of the community bring that up. That's a solid option that can be placed within our state controller. And the state controller is certainly going to be looking at that as an option. So we have options to work with. And the last but not least, as the third significant thing we can do in this plan for solution set, we need to start the budget process now. We know what has happened with late budgets. It looks like we need additional time to get it done. So let's begin that process. Let's look at that American Rescue Plan dollars and let's plan that out for this year and next year. But we need to get together to do it. The last thing is, certainly this allows us to at least elicit input from our controller. We know we've had issues in the past, but the state controller's budget clearly delineates that we need to resolve those issues internally. So we cannot turn a blind eye and go down this rabbit hole we're in. We've got to find a way to solve our problems internally. I think those are the constructive steps I can leave with you as a way forward. I thank you for your time this afternoon. So, thank you and good afternoon.